Hi again, everyone, for another great episode of Green Nickel 101, your source for eco-friendly EV nickel discussions. My name is Leo, and with me is my co-host, John.
Hey, everyone. Welcome back.
Hey, John, guess what?
What, Leo?
Today's episode, we're going to focus on solid state. Great news happening sooner than we all expected. But before we get there, let's quickly recap our previous episode, smart charging, smart and wireless charging.
I thought it was an excellent episode. And given that you're our tech guru, I really thought you shined in the last episode. You really enlightened us with the aspects of smart charging and wireless untethered charging, and really gave our audience a great perspective on where this industry is headed.
Yeah, and you know what? For me, it was more like, as a consumer, what are the things I would look for? And here, we're in a society where we're plugging in our phones, we're plugging in our computers, our laptops for power and all that kind of stuff. I'm not as excited about plugging in my car. And I know there's a lot of range anxiety out there. And, how far can my car go before I have to plug it in again? So the idea of doing some wireless charging or charging your car in different methods or platforms without having to be tethered, I thought was pretty exciting. Mm-hmm. And I looked at it more as a consumer, I guess, than anything else.
Well, what stood out for me, the two aspects of our previous podcast that stood out. Number one, when we were talking about smart charging, what stood out in my mind was flattening the demand curve based on when you're charging. Mm-hmm. And then from the obviously the untethered aspect of the wireless aspect was what I found quite interesting.
Yeah, and you know what? There's some great concepts around battery swapping. I'd love to see some ideas come forth over the next little while about being able to, drive in somewhere and swap your battery out as opposed to sit there and wait till it gets charged.
Well, something tells me this is just the tip of the iceberg.
Tip of the iceberg, and a lot of good things coming up. But you know what? Let's move on to this week's discussion, solid-state batteries. Mm-hmm. Solid-state battery targets have been moved up. There have been some great players in the solid-state space that have been targeting solid-state batteries. We've talked about solid-state in the past.
Well, let's do a little recap. Before we jump into solid-state, why are we talking about solid-state right now? So in the past, we did touch on...
Now, that was an episode we were talking about, I believe, LFP versus NMX.
Well, we talked about iron phosphate versus nickel-based batteries. We also talked about...
the nickel safety of batteries versus, and that sort of thing.
Let's recap that a little bit. So let's look at the lithium-ion battery. Way back to season 1, episode 2, where we took apart the battery. Mm-hmm. Quickly, we have the anode, we have the cathode, positive and negative electrodes. We have a liquid electrolyte in the lithium-ion format, which allows the lithium ions to freely flow back and forth through a separator.
A membrane of some sort.
A membrane, yeah. And what happens in this charging and discharging cycle is you can have these, they call them dendrites. We compare them to stalactites or stalagmites in a cave, which could pierce through the membrane and cause a short in the battery. So if the industry develops a scalable technology in the solid state format.
So getting rid of the electrolyte liquid, let's say, and more of a solid.
Replacing it with a solid polymer that would eliminate some of these issues that the market is.
Yeah, and there's some efficiency upticks as well, right? By going to solid state. So it's going to answer quite some of the challenges that our current lithium-ion batteries have around safety and performance. They're going to only be improved moving to a solid state format.
So the two keys to the battery revolution, two phrases: energy density and safety. Energy density and safety. That's what it's all about. And, there certainly is some amount of politics going on when you have your nickel-based battery technology, which is a higher energy density format, versus your lower range format being iron phosphate. They're claiming that their batteries are safer, and whether that is or isn't the case, it's a minuscule fraction of a percentage, the differential between the two, but it's a marketing point. Okay, the reality is that I guess if you perceive this liquid electrolyte heating up and potentially causing thermal runaway, the possibility or the probability in a higher energy density environment could be greater than in a lower density environment like the iron phosphate.
Gotcha. So solid state is where it's at. It looks like SK Innovation Company, they were originally planning to have a solid state production battery out by 2027, 2028. They've just announced that they're going to do it a couple of years ahead of schedule, ahead of their rivals.
Well, there's no question that the industry is moving towards what we coined the phrase in the previous episode, the holy grail of battery technology, being the solid state format, which has tremendously higher energy density and is perceived to be a much safer format. But we're not quite there yet. And certainly the industry isn't giving up on the lithium-ion liquid electrolyte technology. I think that's going to be around for a while.
Sure.
And here's one thing I wanted to add to my previous points I was making about the two batteries. You have 1,000 battery cells in your car, let's say, okay? The technology, the backup technology that monitors all of these batteries, the whole idea is if one battery goes
rogue,
goes rogue, I love it, great word, goes rogue, the technology instantly shuts it down.
Right.
We're going to do a little rewind here again. So you remember the Matrix movie, right?
Yeah,
this is a
one
little
of my
bit of
favorites.
a crude, how was the future robotic world sourcing their energy through these little, they look like light tubes or of people in them, right? And every time one went sour, this little robot would come and unplug it and throw it down the waste tube, right?
Yeah, and get recycled back into the system. Yeah,
quite a crude concept, but
really gory. But yeah,
it's the same concept with these batteries. You have 1,000 cells in your car. One goes rogue, one shorts out. It gets
down
shut
the
down.
chute, and it goes into a recycle kind of process.
I mean, the technology that's backing up the battery technology is where your safety valve is. So,
listen, you know what? This is really good news. Just so everybody knows, SK Innovation Company is a battery research company, South Korean company. And they also released recently a jump in sales in the last quarter. Battery sales rose 68% from a year earlier to 817 billion won, which is about, $700 million US dollars. And it forecasts sales to climb above 3 trillion next year and 6 trillion won in 2022. So you do the math there. It's certainly in an upward trajectory,
Well, what I find...
By the way, it aims to turn a profit next year.
Which is very significant.
Right.
Any new technology, that you strive for that positive profit scenario, but it usually takes a while to get there.
Yeah.
But
one thing I wanted to add, John, is they're teaming up with the U.S.-based company called Solid Power, and they make the battery. So I think SK Innovation has the patents and the know-how and all that sort of thing. And Solid Power, they're teaming up so that they can make it a reality. Right?
Well, what's interesting is there's a tremendous amount of mergers and acquisitions in this developing technology. You have the big fish eating the little fish. And, there's no doubt that given that solid state is the future of the lithium-ion platform, you have the big players, whether it's the big battery companies, the big car companies, they all want to position themselves in the new technology, which will probably be mainstream production, let's say certainly the next 5 to 10 years. So they're placing their bets today. QuantumScape, whether it's there's many different solid state technologies out there that are merging with larger companies to help enhance and develop.
Yeah, there's a lot of movement happening in the space. There are rivals, there's deals being made, partnerships. Just to give you guys little bits and snippets of this article. This article is a BNN Bloomberg article. You're going to have links to it in our comments and bio there. It's basically saying here that there's potentially a slash in EV charging times to about 10 minutes using this new solid state technology from as much as several hours. So you'll be able to plug in a solid state battery once it's developed and out there, and it's got to get refined. And of course, there's systems that have to work well with it, circuit boards and software and whatnot. But once they get all the kinks out, and they're a couple of years, maybe three years away, apparently, SK from developing such a battery. you're going to have some really fast charge times. And this kind of plays along with our, range anxiety that we talked about, we keep talking about, which is one of the kind of, setbacks of full EV adoption in the common marketplace, right? So this is exciting news.
And it's funny that you say that because I did leave that out. The third aspect of call it the trilogy of battery technology.
So density, safety,
charge times.
Yeah. And
actually solid state has all three.
Yeah, and also that's the trinity, I guess, but ultimately you're bringing down the cost of the kilowatt hour as you bring things to economies of scale, scaling things up. They plan to use a nickel, did you hear that? Nickel, cobalt, manganese cathode and anode based on silicon or graphite for its solid state batteries by 2025.
There you have it, folks. There's your nickel again.
Black and white, yeah. And they also seek, sorry, John.
Well, I was just saying that's why we're calling this Green Nickel 101, right?
Yeah, there's a reason why we kind of focus on nickel, isn't there?
Yeah, and we're, the solid state, the other thing I think is interesting here is, every new technology, you get there in steps. And I have read some articles that the transition from a liquid electrolyte, which is prevalent in the lithium-ion batteries today, to the ultimate holy grail of the solid state. There is a transitionary step where they're looking at a semi-solid polymer.
Like a gel?
Yes.
Kind of
what they're doing is they're loading the liquid electrolyte with mineral salts that would reduce any amount of temperature and thermal runaway, but still allow this conductivity of the ions to freely flow through the membrane. So that would be your intermediary step.
Yeah.
Right? So.
And I'm reading a little bit further as you're talking here, John. It seems to be like this is not just a one-party show. This is a party that's developing here. LG Energy Solution, world's second largest lithium-ion battery maker, said it aims to commercialize solid-state batteries between 2027 and 2030. Commercializing meaning like for production use, right? Not testing or researching and that sort of thing. And another Korean player, Samsung, is forecast to start mass producing batteries in 2027. So it seems like the SK Innovation has one leg up on its rivals with a couple of years, advance, starting with its commercialization, hopefully in 2025. But the big picture is good for EV and EV adoption.
And solid state. So this interesting little quote in there from LG. We have never caused fires with our batteries, and we have the world's best technology for high nickel batteries.
Nickel batteries. That sounds like nickel sulfides to me, class 1 category. So high nickel batteries, a high nickel cathode, I guess, component to their battery structure. Well, that's all great news. Just to roll back into another article here, global car makers are now targeting $500 billion for EVs and batteries. This is the new. They've just upped their kind of budget forecast. Now, where was this before, John?
The previous number, I think, was 300 billion, and because of the magnitude of the adoption of the battery storage platform, and we've got to remember here, folks, we're not just talking about EVs. We're talking about power walls in your home. We're talking about stationary storage. We're talking about the whole battery storage revolution, okay? Now, in this case, this article is talking about automakers, fine. So,
and that's only between now and 2030.
Yeah. So it's
not like a forever number. It's like finite between now and 2030.
Based on today's data.
Next 8 years, basically.
Today's data, they've decided to bump their expenditures from 300 billion to half a trillion, 500 billion.
Well, they're certainly aiming to wean car buyers away from fossil fuels and meeting, tough decarbonization targets that our governments and our consumers are frankly demanding. Less than 3 years ago, that's right, 300 billion. Just reading that further down in the next paragraph here. And just breaking down, there's a great visual here, graph. Global automakers, EV automakers and battery investments. They got a great graph here showing from the left, you got Volkswagen, Daimler, Stellantis, Ford, GM, BMW, SAIC, and then you have Tesla. There's a whole slew of other automakers here, but going from left to right, these are kind of like the top 10.
You can see that Volkswagen is, we have to say they're all in. They've pushed all their chips to the middle of the table because they're far and above. They're double number two. So
yeah, so just to let the listeners know that can't see the visual here, guys, they're well over $100 billion. Of that 515, $500 billion. They're well into the 120-ish billion mark.
Volkswagen constitutes
about 20% of the spend worldwide that car makers are anteing up. Volkswagen is definitely stepping up here. Now, after that is Daimler at maybe a 45 to 50 billion. But look at Tesla, which is down the kind of scale here. They're only spending just over 20 billion, 25 to 30 billion. Even less, 22 billion. And they are the largest EV manufacturer right now that sells all of their cars that they make.
Well, I think because they've already figured it out, Leo. Okay,
it's more efficient. They're more efficient at the spend. Where I would say Volkswagen has got a lot of work to do to rejig, realign.
Of course.
The supply chain realignment and everything.
We call that first mover advantage, I think.
Yeah, interesting. Well, good for you. Anyway, you know what? This is a great segue to jump into our spotlight.
Sounds good.
This week's spotlight has been brought to you by Tartesson Nickel.
Tartesson is drilling its Kenbridge nickel sulfide project in Ontario to expand the resource and meet the needs of the rapidly growing EV battery market. Class 1 nickel is an essential component in battery production and a critical element in the North American supply chain. The Kenbridge nickel deposit indicates there is significant potential to expand the mineral resource estimate with additional high-grade targets at the Kenbridge North site.
Tartesson Nickel, TN on the CSE.
So our spotlight this week is on Tartesson Nickels, new analysis by Fundamental Research Corp. Dated October 28th, 2021, and it's very recent to when we're recording this episode. They've upgraded the fair market value price of Tartesson Nickel and given us a whole bunch of highlights here. Some really exciting stuff happening here at Tartesson.
Well, Fundamental Research is one of those companies that goes out there and does some analysis on some up-and-coming companies. In this case, it's Tartesson Nickel. And, it's unfortunate and rare, I guess, that organic retail buying in the market sometimes fails to capture the true present fair value of a company. It's just the nature of the way markets trade, how you still have the downtick and predatory short selling and all these things that are very difficult and damaging on, especially in this case, mining companies. So they're giving a fair present day fair value to Tartesson Nickel of 77 cents.
Right, and current price is about 45 to 47. At the time of this analysis, it was 44. I know today's is 47.
Yeah.
So they're giving us a fair market value of 77 cents based on present and current
economics
knowns, right? Take us through some of these highlights here real quickly, John.
Well, Tartesson shares are up 83% since Fundamental Research initially started coverage on the company in October of 2020.
About a year ago?
Yeah, so that's significant. Obviously, there's a huge drill program going on.
We've talked about that, yeah.
10,000 meter drill program, of which 9,000 meters has been completed. There has been a couple of press releases out. I believe it was somewhere on October 7th and October 13th where they released,
some results, yeah.
Hole 201, 202, 203, whatever it was.
Yeah, on the main Kenbridge deposit, right?
Yeah, they released some robust returns, 25 meters of 1%, even some better grades, shorter of 3% and even 4%. So more data is coming out.
And relatively speaking, John, for our listeners, what do these numbers mean? I know we're not geologists, but I mean 1%. And copper here, I'm seeing at 0.41% over 25 meters in one zone. These are substantial numbers. These are really good numbers.
Yeah, if you compare them to some of the other releases from junior mining companies, battery metals companies out there, I think these bode well for Tartesson.
So we could expect a robust, preliminary assessment
Yeah, the
economic
PEA,
assessment.
the PEA, I think they're putting the final touches on. It appears that from what I understand, it's coming out before the end of the year, and that'll provide some economic data on how this project could be moved into production. Now, the other thing that I find really interesting about this company is they have a strong balance sheet. As of June of 2021, I think there was about 19 million in working capital, cash, and marketable securities on the balance sheet. And what's great about that number is it is at a very non-dilutive aspect to the balance sheet. If this company has to raise a bit of money for whatever they have to raise,
like a feasibility study or more drilling or whatever.
Yeah, they can rely on some of the equity that exists on their balance sheet as opposed to issuing shares and diluting the share base.
Yeah, and you know what? Just reading here, Fundamental Research Corp is also states here that they believe the project has room for resource expansion, which basically means these numbers coming out should, show favorably well for the resources that are, on its books here and expanding from those, right? And especially with higher grade. They don't know what, but they're calling it mineralization at depth. We're going to have to wait for more PR releases and more results in the next several weeks.
And then what's interesting as well, they are testing what they're calling the Kenbridge North target.
Oh, I know all about Kenbridge North. I've been watching this quite closely. Go ahead, John.
Well, it's I think you're in love with Kenbridge North and what the prospects
because it's not
are there.
Part of the. Correct me if I'm wrong. It's not part of the existing resource that's been.
Well, the existing resource is what defines Tardisan to date.
Right.
But if they actually find something at the North target, that would
brand new, right?
It would constitute a new discovery, and that's very significant. And when you have a new discovery that's 2 kilometers away from the existing discovery, you start scratching your head and you're thinking, I wonder what's in the middle.
Yeah, exactly.
Is it connected? I don't know. I mean, I'm not a geologist.
I've seen some of these magnetic geophysics surveys from the north, and we're talking it's only a couple of 2-3 kilometers away from the main Kenbridge deposit, right?
Correct.
But I've seen some photos and color, the 3D color kind of magnetic, surveys showing electromagnetic surveys.
Yeah, and
they look very attractive, John.
That's the information that they use to define the drill targets. So now, obviously, they're drilling these targets, and once those targets are drilled, they'll do some additional geophysics, which is called borehole geophysics, where they'll drop sensors down these drill holes to say, well, did we hit? Or if we missed, how much did we miss by? Do we got to go 10 meters to the east, 10 meters to the west, north, south? And that's part of the whole process of defining the if in fact there's a new resource there or a new discovery, that's how they're going to define it moving forward.
We can't finish off on the spotlight until we quickly reflect on nickel prices. Up 26% year over year, almost $9 US a pound. We talked about where some have speculated nickel to hit the $10 holy grail, kind of like
$10 and higher.
Mark, right?
We always felt that $10 would be the incentivizing nickel price to really start bringing a lot more money into the sector to help find and promote new discoveries.
Again, the Fundamental Research Group in highlight here saying we believe, not we, me and you, John, but Fundamental Research Group believes inflation, supply chain disruptions, and slow rate hikes will provide near-term support to these base metal prices. So I think we're all in agreement that we should start seeing prices going north of the current.
Yeah, I think that applies to the whole battery supply chain. I mean, there's a lot of blue skies, as they say, in the battery metals mining sector moving forward.
So you know what? I'm really excited. I'm looking forward to this PEA, Preliminary Economic Assessment Study. It's expected to be released before the year end. We're looking forward to it. Well, with all that being said, John, guess what? We've reached the end of the show. So everybody, thanks for joining us. We hope to see you next week. Don't miss it. Let us know what's on your mind. You can find us on Twitter and Instagram and on YouTube. Our handle is @GreenNickel101. We'll answer any questions on our next episode, and be sure to leave comments and opinions. And remember, we upload new episodes every single Monday. And until next time, think nickel and have a green day. See you guys.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Tardis and nickel, traded on the Canadian Stock Exchange, symbol TN, or over the counter, symbol TTSRF.